5 children vanished after a house fire, the unsolved Sodder Family Mystery. The fire was supposed to explain everything, but when the ashes cooled, 5 children were missing, no bodies were found, and the night refused to give back its secrets. What happened to the Sodder children still unsettles America decades later. If stories rooted in reality disturb you, stay with this one, subscribe for more true horror, and leave your thoughts below, because this case only grows darker the deeper it goes. On Christmas Eve of 1945, the Sodder family home stood on a quiet hillside near Fayetteville, West Virginia. George and Jenny Sodder had built their life through hard labor, discipline, and routine. The house was modest but full, crowded with 10 children whose movements filled every room with sound and presence. That night began like many others, with the expectation of mourning, of gifts, of survival through another Appalachian winter. Nothing suggested that by dawn, the family would be permanently broken. Shortly after midnight, a fire broke out inside the Sodder home. Flames spread quickly through the wooden structure, faster than anyone expected. George and Jenny managed to escape with 4 of their children. 5 others remained inside: Maurice, Martha, Louis, Jenny, and Betty. The fire consumed the house completely, leaving only smoking ruins by morning. Neighbors gathered, authorities arrived, and the assumption settled quickly. The missing children had perished in the blaze. But the ashes told a different story. No bones were found. Not fragments. Not teeth. Nothing that should have remained if 5 human bodies had burned in a residential fire. The local fire chief suggested the remains may have been completely destroyed, but experts later contradicted that explanation. Even intense fires do not erase human bones so thoroughly. The absence was not subtle. It was absolute. George Sodder refused to accept the conclusion. He had worked with fire. He understood heat. He understood destruction. And he understood that something was wrong. The fire itself began to unravel under scrutiny. The Sodders had no electricity issues that night. The wiring was inspected months earlier. The cause of the fire was never conclusively identified. That uncertainty lingered like smoke long after the ruins cooled. More unsettling details surfaced almost immediately. George attempted to use a ladder to rescue the children trapped upstairs, only to find it missing from its usual place. He then tried to start his truck to drive closer to the house, but it failed inexplicably, despite functioning normally the day before. Later, the ladder was discovered at the bottom of a nearby embankment, far from where it belonged. As daylight exposed the remains of the home, neighbors reported strange observations from the night of the fire. Some claimed they saw figures moving near the property. Others mentioned a car parked nearby during the early hours, its presence unexplained. One witness reported seeing balls of fire being thrown onto the roof. These statements were dismissed as confusion, panic, or imagination. Yet they remained unaddressed and unresolved. The Sodders began to question everything. They learned that the fire department took hours to arrive, despite being located only a few miles away. The official explanation was that the fire chief could not be reached and that volunteers were difficult to assemble at night. To George, this delay felt less like misfortune and more like neglect. Then came the threats. Months before the fire, a stranger had visited the Sodder home, criticizing George for his outspoken political views, particularly his opposition to certain foreign regimes. The man warned that the house could be destroyed and that George's children could be harmed. At the time, the words seemed exaggerated, even absurd. After the fire, they became impossible to forget. Another salesman, visiting shortly before Christmas, had remarked that the electrical wiring was dangerous and could cause a fire. Later inspection proved that statement false. The wires were intact. The implication remained. Someone had been paying attention to the Sodder home long before the flames appeared. In the weeks following the fire, the Sodders combed through the debris themselves. Against official advice, George searched the ruins repeatedly, digging through ash and charred wood. He found small household items, remnants of daily life, but never a trace of his children. The silence of the ground became a message of its own. Jenny Sodder was consumed by grief that never softened. She dressed in black for the rest of her life. Every photograph of the missing children was examined obsessively. She studied faces in newspapers, crowds in magazines, and later, television screens. Each unfamiliar child carried the possibility of recognition and the agony of uncertainty. One photograph would haunt the family for decades. It arrived in the mail years after the fire, showing a young man with dark hair and unfamiliar features. On the back, a cryptic message was written, referencing the Sodder name and suggesting survival. The implication was devastating. If even one child had lived, then the fire was not an accident. It was a cover. Authorities maintained their position. The case was closed. The children were declared dead. There was no investigation into kidnapping, no pursuit of alternate explanations. The Sodders were left alone with their suspicions, their grief, and a growing conviction that the truth had been deliberately buried. The hillside where the house once stood became a monument to absence. George erected a billboard along the nearby highway displaying photographs of the missing children and offering a reward for information. Drivers passed it daily, confronted by faces that refused to fade into history. Some dismissed it as denial. Others felt the discomfort of an unresolved crime staring back at them. As years passed, the Sodder family endured ridicule and skepticism. But facts did not disappear with time. Fires did not erase bones. Ladders did not walk away on their own. Trucks did not fail simultaneously with rescue attempts by coincidence. Too many pieces were out of place. By the end of the first year, the Sodders understood something deeply unsettling. Whatever happened to their children did not end the night of the fire. It began there, and whoever was responsible had succeeded in turning destruction into silence. The unanswered questions multiplied, and with each passing Christmas, the absence grew heavier. 5 children vanished without proof of death, without graves, without closure. The fire was only the surface. Beneath it waited something far darker, something that refused to be extinguished. The years following the fire offered no relief for the Sodder family. George and Jenny poured themselves into relentless investigation, driven by a mixture of hope, grief, and suspicion. They followed every lead, no matter how improbable. Sightings of children resembling their own were reported across states and decades, sometimes in grocery stores, other times in crowded city streets. Each claim ignited a spark of hope, only to be extinguished when verification proved impossible. The first breakthrough, or what felt like one, came in 1949, 4 years after the fire. A man named Silas Lee contacted the Sodders, claiming to have information regarding the missing children. He alleged that a network of kidnappers had targeted the family, motivated by George's political activism during the war. The details were vague, but they suggested the children had been taken, not burned. The Sodders, desperate to find answers, considered this a lead worth pursuing. Attempts to trace Silas Lee's claims proved frustrating. He disappeared almost as mysteriously as the children themselves, leaving no forwarding address, no phone number, no traceable connection. Law enforcement, already dismissive of the case, refused to investigate further. George and Jenny began to understand that official help would never come. They were on their own, confronting a reality where the system that should have protected them offered nothing but silence. In 1950, another clue arrived, a photograph mailed anonymously to the Sodders. The image showed a young man in a crowded marketplace, holding a bundle of toys and smiling faintly at the camera. Written in the corner was a message: "We have them safe. They remember you." The handwriting was unfamiliar, the tone chilling. The photograph reignited hope, but also terror. If the children were alive, who held them, and why had they never been returned? George became obsessed. He spent years traveling from town to town, speaking to people, showing photographs, and questioning anyone who might have encountered children matching his family's description. He spoke at schools, at churches, at every possible gathering. He placed ads in newspapers in distant states. He even hired private investigators, though the trail often went cold. The investigation was exhausting, but George was unrelenting. To stop would have been to accept the unthinkable, that his children were gone forever without explanation. Jenny's grief evolved into a haunting presence. She visited the ruins of their home countless times, imagining the children running through the rooms they once occupied. She pressed their photographs to her chest, whispering to them in empty air. Every Christmas was a tormenting reminder of what was missing, and she never ceased hoping for a miracle. Her family's life became a series of hollow rituals, shadows of what should have been. The local community, while sympathetic, could not fully comprehend the depth of the Sodders' despair. Some considered George and Jenny obsessed, perhaps even delusional. Yet even skeptics could not explain the anomalies surrounding the fire, the missing ladder, the inexplicably disabled truck, and the complete absence of remains where 5 children should have perished. The story spread, becoming a local legend, a cautionary tale whispered to children, remembered with unease by adults. Over the decades, sightings continued. Reports poured in from distant cities. A child resembling Betty Sodder seen boarding a bus, a pair of young twins matching Jenny and Martha walking hand in hand with strangers, a teenager resembling Lewis caught in a crowd during a parade. Each claim was fleeting, unverified, but consistent enough to suggest the possibility that someone, somewhere, had taken them from the night of the fire and hidden them from the world. In 1968, nearly 23 years after the fire, George and Jenny received another anonymous letter. It claimed to reveal the fate of the children, that they had been sold to foster homes in another state, that their identities had been deliberately changed, and that anyone who tried to uncover the truth would face consequences. The language was threatening yet vague, the handwriting eerily familiar to Jenny. The letter confirmed their worst fears. The fire had been no accident. Their children had been taken intentionally. By this point, George and Jenny were older, worn by the unending quest for answers. Yet the embers of hope refused to die. They continued placing photographs along highways, contacting local authorities, writing letters to the press, and speaking at gatherings in search of someone, anyone, who might know the truth. They became a living testament to loss and obsession, their lives consumed by the absence of the 5 children who vanished on that night in 1945. The media occasionally revisited the story. Newspapers, radio broadcasts, and later television segments recounted the Sodder tragedy. Each retelling added layers of fear and speculation, highlighting the unnatural gaps in the narrative, how 5 children could disappear without trace, how a family could endure a fire and emerge to find their lives hollowed, how threats and cryptic messages suggested a darkness beyond comprehension. Despite decades passing, unanswered questions persist. Could the children have survived? Were they hidden in plain sight, forever separated from the family who loved them? Was the fire a deliberate cover-up orchestrated by enemies unknown? The ambiguity has kept the story alive, a chilling reminder that some tragedies do not resolve neatly, that horror is not always in the flames themselves, but in the uncertainty that lingers long afterward. Even today, the Sodder story evokes dread. Historians and amateur investigators continue to piece together timelines, study letters, trace photographs, and debate sightings. The case has inspired books, documentaries, and countless online discussions, but no definitive answers have emerged. The house may have burned down, but the fire never consumed the questions, the fear, or the shadows of the children themselves. Psychologically, the Sodder case embodies a form of horror beyond physical violence. It is the horror of ambiguity, of absence, of a night that should have ended in death but instead left a vacuum where life might still exist. Families who encounter this story confront a primal fear, that loved ones can vanish without explanation, that safety can be destroyed by unseen hands, that evil can linger quietly, invisibly, and indefinitely. The tale also resonates because of its emotional authenticity. George and Jenny were real people, their suffering genuine. They did not invent the fire or the missing children, they endured them. They provide the audience not with fictional terror but with lived, persistent horror, a sense of helplessness that fiction rarely achieves. The Sodder children's disappearance is a reminder of the fragility of life and the darkness that can occupy the spaces between certainty and speculation. Each reported sighting, each cryptic letter, each unverified photograph reinforces a terrifying possibility that the missing children were taken, manipulated, or hidden, and that someone, perhaps still alive, knew the truth all along. Even the local landscape bears the weight of the horror. The hillside where the Sodder house once stood is silent, marked by memories and occasional visitors who come to leave flowers or notes. For decades, the photograph-covered billboard displayed images of the missing children, a constant visual reminder of lives lost and questions unresolved. The physical absence of the house contrasts with the enduring presence of mystery and dread. Modern audiences still feel the impact. Online forums and video retellings debate theories: organized kidnapping, political motives, supernatural intervention, or a dark combination of circumstances. The fascination is not just in the fire but in the unanswered questions, in the terror that reality can provide stories far darker than any fiction. And so, the horror endures. 5 children vanished, a family devastated, and a community haunted. The fire claimed their home but failed to erase the consequences. Letters, photographs, sightings, and unanswered questions continue to circulate, a chilling testament to the enduring darkness that can follow a single, inexplicable event. The Sodder case remains unsolved, a cautionary tale that even in the mundane rhythm of life, tragedy can strike, leaving horror in its wake that no time can fully heal. The story concludes not with a resolution, but with a lingering sense of dread. The mystery of the Sodder children persists, and with it, the understanding that some questions may never be answered, that some fires never truly burn out, and that the worst horrors are often those we cannot see, touch, or confirm, but can only imagine in the shadows that follow us home. If the story of the Sodder children left your skin crawling and your mind spinning, don't let the darkness end here. Subscribe now for more real horror stories that chill to the bone. Share your theories in the comments. Could the children still be alive somewhere? Hit the bell to never miss a story that blurs the line between reality and nightmare, because the most terrifying truths are often the ones we cannot confirm.